Blood soaked through Sarah's scrubs as she pulled the wounded stranger from the raging storm into her home, unaware that her act of mercy would drag her into a vicious war between Chicago's most ruthless crime families. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The night the storm brought him to her doorstep. Sarah Winters had just finished a 14-hour shift at Memorial Hospital. Lightning cracked across the sky as she pulled into her driveway, illuminating the rows of identical suburban homes momentarily in stark white light. Thunder followed almost immediately, vibrating through her small Toyota as rain hammered against the windshield. 3 days of non-stop emergency room chaos had left her drained, her scrubs still faintly stained with other people's blood despite the hospital's industrial-strength laundry service. All Sarah wanted was a hot shower, a glass of wine, and at least 6 uninterrupted hours of sleep before her next shift. The emergency department had been overwhelmed with everything from minor fender benders to a bus crash that had required all hands on deck. Her back ached from CPR rotations, her feet throbbed inside her sensible shoe, her mind kept replaying the faces of patients she couldn't save. Sarah was 32, divorced for 3 years, and married to her job in all the ways that mattered. Her ex-husband had called her pathologically compassionate during their final argument, spitting the words like they were an insult rather than the core of who she was. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe that's why when lightning illuminated a figure staggering along her street, she didn't immediately lock her doors and call the police. Instead, Sarah squinted through the rain-streaked windshield, her trained eye catching the uneven gait, the way the man's hand pressed against his side. The nursing instinct that never fully switched off recognized the signs of blood loss and injury before her conscious mind could process the danger of approaching a stranger in the middle of a storm. She was out of her car before she could second-guess herself, rain immediately soaking through her thin scrubs. "Sir? Do you need help?" Sarah called over the howling wind, one hand holding her windbreaker closed against the storm. The man's head jerked up at her voice and Sarah froze. Even through the curtain of rain, she could see that his white dress shirt was soaked crimson across the abdomen. His expensive-looking suit was ruined, torn and muddy, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. But it was his eyes that stopped her, sharp, calculating, despite the obvious pain he was in. "I'm fine," he managed, the words tight and clipped. His other hand moved slightly, and Sarah caught the unmistakable outline of a gun beneath his jacket. Every reasonable impulse screamed at her to retreat, to get back in her car and drive away, or at the very least call 911. But the rational part of her brain was overridden by the part that had spent the last decade saving lives. "You're not fine. You're bleeding heavily. Single quotes. Sarah took a step closer, rain streaming down her face. "I'm a nurse. Let me help you before you collapse." As if on cue, the man's knees buckled. Sarah lunged forward, catching him with a strength that belied her 5'4" frame. Years of transferring patients had given her a solid core and the knowledge of how to distribute weight properly. "I've got you," she said, supporting him as another flash of lightning illuminated them in the downpour. "My house is right here. Let's get you inside. No hospitals," the man growled, his breath hot against her ear as she helped him toward her front door. "You need no hospitals," he repeated, firmer this time. "Please." The please caught her off guard. It was softly spoken, almost vulnerable, contrasting sharply with the hardness in his eyes and the gun she could still feel pressed between them. Sarah fumbled with her keys, supporting his weight with her shoulder. "Fine, no hospitals for now. But if you're as bad as I think you are, that might not be a choice you get to make." Inside, water pooled around their feet on the hardwood floor of her entryway. The man was heavier than he looked, solid muscle beneath the sodden suit. Sarah kicked the door closed behind them, cutting off the howling wind, and navigated them toward her couch. "This is going to ruin my furniture," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "I'll buy you a new couch," he said through gritted teeth as she lowered him down. "Shut up and let me see." Sarah's professional tone took over as she peeled back his jacket, revealing the full extent of the blood-soaked shirt underneath. "I need to cut this off." Without waiting for permission, she retrieved trauma shears from her work bag and sliced through the expensive fabric. The wound beneath made her inhale sharply, a clean entry wound that had torn through the external oblique muscle. Based on the lack of an exit wound, the bullet was still inside. "This needs surgery," Sarah said flatly, already gathering supplies from her well-stocked first aid kit. "What I can do here is temporary at best, just patched enough to stop the bleeding," he said, his voice steadier than it had any right to be. "I have people who can handle the rest." Sarah's hands paused over her supplies. "People? What kind of people have their own private surgeon?" The man's eyes met hers, dark and unreadable, the kind you don't want to know about. A chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes crept down Sarah's spine. "You're not just some guy who got mugged, are you?" His lips quirked in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. "No, I'm not." Despite the warning bells clanging in her head, Sarah continued cleaning the wound. "I don't need to know your name or why someone shot you, but I do need to know if whoever did this might come looking to finish the job. They won't find me here," he said with such certainty that Sarah almost believed him. How reassuring, she muttered, administering a local anesthetic from her emergency supplies. The man didn't even flinch as the needle pierced his skin. I'm going to clean and pack this wound, but without proper image, I can't tell what internal damage you might have. Outside, lightning continued to flash, thunder rolling overhead as the storm intensified. The power flickered once, twice, then stabilized. If the electricity goes out, this gets a lot more complicated, Sarah warned, threading a suture needle. It won't. You control the weather too. Her sarcasm was automatic, a defense mechanism against the growing realization of just how dangerous her Good Samaritan act might have been. The man actually chuckled, then winced. No, but I do have a generator being delivered to your house within the hour. Sarah's hands stilled. Excuse me, my security team is already securing the perimeter of your property. The generator's a precaution. Sarah sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, alone in her house with an armed, injured stranger who apparently had people and security teams. Who the hell are you? The man studied her for a long moment, his expression calculating. Finally, he extended a hand that was remarkably steady despite his injury. Michael Coretti, and I'm afraid I've just complicated your life considerably. Nurse Winters. The fact that he knew her last name without her having introduced herself was not lost on Sarah. Neither was the name he'd given her. The Coretti family controlled most of the city's shipping industry, construction contracts, and according to rumors, a significant portion of its criminal enterprises as well. She'd just invited a mafia boss into her home, and based on the increasing activity she could now detect outside her window, his organization had already surrounded her house. The storm continued to rage outside, but Sarah suddenly realized it was the least of her problem. Coretti, Sarah repeated, the name hanging in the air between them. As in Coretti Construction? Coretti Shipping? Among other ventures, Michael replied, his eyes never leaving hers. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Coretti family wasn't just wealthy, they were powerful in ways that transcended legal business operations. Her father, a beat cop for 30 years before retirement, had mentioned the name often enough, always with a mixture of respect and wariness. I should call the police, she said, though her hands continued working methodically, packing the wound with antiseptic-soaked gauze. You won't. It wasn't a threat, just a simple statement of fact that Sarah found herself unable to dispute. She'd already made her choice when she brought him inside. Why me? She asked instead, securing the bandage with medical tape. Why my house? Convenience, Michael said, then winced as he shifted position. Your neighborhood isn't under surveillance by rival organizations or law enforcement, and you have a particular skill set I needed. Sarah snorted. Lucky me. A sharp knock at the back door made her jump. Michael didn't react except to say, "That's my security chief, Dante. You should let him in, should I?" Sarah challenged, suddenly finding her backbone. "Or I could just walk out the front door right now." "You could," Michael agreed, his voice maddeningly calm. "But then whoever shot me might mistake you for an associate, and I'd hate for my bad luck to become yours." Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. The rational part of her brain was screaming to run, to call 911, to do anything but continue down this dangerous path. But another part, the same stubbornness that had gotten her through medical school and a painful divorce, refused to be intimidated. "Fine," she said, standing up, "but if your people mess up my house, you're paying for more than just a new couch." The ghost of a smile crossed Michael's face. Duly noted, Dante was nothing like Sarah expected. She'd anticipated a stereotypical mob in force, bulky, intimidating, maybe with a face full of scars. Instead, she opened the door to a slim, impeccably dressed black man with wire-rimmed glasses and the calm demeanor of an accountant. Only his eyes, sharp and assessing, betrayed his true profession. "Ms. Winters," he greeted her politely. "My team has secured the perimeter. May I come in?" Sarah stepped aside wordlessly. Dante carried a large medical kit that looked far more comprehensive than her own emergency supplies, along with what appeared to be a small suitcase. In her living room, Michael was sitting up, looking remarkably composed for someone with a gunshot wound. The transformation was startling. Gone was the vulnerability she'd glimpsed earlier, replaced by an air of command that seemed to fill the room despite his injured state. "Report," he ordered as Dante approached. "The Moretti shooters have been identified and tracked. Local surveillance cameras are temporarily looping footage, and we've established a 2-block security zone around this location." Dante spoke efficiently while unpacking his medical kit. "Luciana is handling the business fallout. Your brother has been notified of your status." Sarah watched this exchange with growing unease. "Exactly how many people do you have surrounding my house right now?" 8, Dante answered without looking up from his supplies. 8 armed men are outside my house, and you didn't think I deserved a say in this." Sarah's voice rose with indignation. "Would you have preferred fewer?" Michael asked mildly. "The people who did this won't stop until they confirm I'm dead. My security team is as much for your protection now as mine." The implication wasn't lost on Sarah. By helping Michael Coretti, she'd unwittingly placed herself in the crosshairs of a mob war. "This is insane," she muttered, sinking into an armchair. "I was just trying to keep you from bleeding out on my street." "Your compassion is admirable," Michael said, and surprisingly, there was no sarcasm in his tone. "It's also exceedingly rare in my world." Dante had begun examining Michael's wound, his expression clinical and detached. "You need proper surgery," he concluded after a moment. "I can stabilize you here, but the bullet needs to come out in a controlled environment. Use the safe house on Lakeshore, Michael instructed. Dr. Abrams is on standby. I've already prepared the transport, Dante confirmed. 15 minutes. Sarah watched this exchange with a mixture of fascination and horror. They were discussing an underground medical procedure with the same casualness she and her colleagues might discuss a lunch order. Wait, she interrupted. You're leaving? Just like that? Michael turned those calculating eyes toward her again. Would you prefer I stay? No, but Sarah gestured helplessly at her blood-soaked couch, her ruined floor. What am I supposed to do now? Pretend none of this happened? That would be advisable, Dante said without looking up from his work. Michael, however, seemed to understand her distress. Sarah, he said, using her first name for the first time. You saved my life tonight. The Coretti family doesn't forget debts like that. I don't want a debt, Sarah said firmly. I want my normal life back. Your normal life ended the moment you stepped out of your car, Michael replied, not unkindly. But I can offer you protection. No one associated with me will ever come to harm. The statement should have been reassuring. Instead, it sent another chill down Sarah's spine. She wasn't naive enough to believe protection came without strings. And what's the price for this protection? Michael's expression softened slightly. Consider it already paid by your actions tonight. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but Sarah noticed the rain was beginning to slacken. Thunder rumbled. More distant now, as if the worst had passed. 2 minutes, sir, Dante announced, checking his watch. The perimeter team has confirmed the route is clear. Sarah watched as Michael attempted to stand, his jaw tightening against the pain. Without thinking, she moved to assist him, her nurse's instincts overriding her better judgment once again. You should really go to a hospital, she said, supporting his weight as he found his balance. Dr. Abrams is very qualified, he assured her, his hand briefly covering hers where it rested on his arm. Former chief of surgery at Northwestern before certain unfortunate gambling debts made him more amenable to alternative employment. Sarah didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of it all. So what happens now? You disappear and I just go back to my shifts at Memorial like nothing happened? Michael studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Nothing will be the same for you after tonight, he said finally, but how different it becomes is partially your choice. What does that mean? Before he could answer, headlights swept across the living room as vehicles pulled up outside. Dante moved to the window, checked the street, then nodded to Michael. It's time, sir. As they prepared to leave, Michael pressed something into Sarah's hand-to-burner phone, simple and untraceable. If you need anything at all, press the only number programmed into this, day or night. Sarah stared at the phone, then back at the man who had irrevocably altered her life in the space of an hour. I never asked for any of this, she said quietly. Michael Coretti's expression was unreadable as Dante helped him toward the door. Neither did I, Sarah, but we played the hands we're dealt, and then he was gone, leaving nothing but bloodstains and questions in his wake. Sarah spent the remainder of that stormy night scrubbing blood from her hardwood floors and couch, though she knew the latter was a lost cause. The physical labor helped quiet her racing thoughts, gave her something concrete to focus on besides the surreal encounter that had just upended her life. Outside, the rain gradually subsided, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by the occasional drip from her gutters. By dawn, her home was clean again, at least superficially, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just the burner phone that now sat on her kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. It was the weight of unseen eyes that seemed to follow her movements. The knowledge that somewhere in her quiet neighborhood, Michael Coretti's people were watching. She called in sick to her shift at Memorial for the first time in 3 years, claiming a stomach virus. Her supervisor didn't question it. Sarah had enough accrued sick time to take a month off if she wanted. She spent the day alternating between fitful naps and anxious pacing, jumping at every car that drove past her house, every creak of the settling foundation. The doorbell rang at precisely 3 p.m. Sarah froze, her hand halfway to her mouth with a spoonful of the soup she'd been attempting to eat. For a wild moment, she considered ignoring it, pretending she wasn't home, but curiosity overcame fear. Through the peephole, she saw a delivery man holding a large packet. No uniform, just jeans and a plain work shirt. Something about his posture alert scanning told her he wasn't from any regular delivery service. Miss Winters? He asked when she cracked the door. Delivery from Coretti Interiors. I didn't order anything from Coretti Interiors, she said, though she had a sinking suspicion what might be in the large box. The man smiled blandly. It's already paid for, ma'am. Where would you like it set up? 20 minutes later, a brand new leather sofa occupied the space where her bloodstained one had been. The delivery men, 3 of them, all with the same alert. Assessing eyes had removed her old couch with military efficiency, leaving no trace of their presence except the gleaming new furniture. The attached card read simply, debts paid in full. Sarah ran her hand over the butter-soft leather, feeling a complicated mixture of gratitude and resentment. The sofa was undoubtedly nicer than anything she could afford on a nurse's salary. Italian leather in a rich caramel color that somehow matched her decor perfectly. Someone had done their homework on her taste. That thought sent a fresh wave of unease through her. Just how much did the Corettis know about her? How long had she been under observation before Michael staggered into her life? She went back to work the next day, desperate for normalcy. The familiar chaos of the emergency department should have been comforting triaging patients, starting IVS, charting vital signs, but Sarah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, studying faces, cataloging unfamiliar visitors with a new paranoia. You okay, Winters? Dr. Patel asked during a rare quiet moment at the nurse's station. You seem jumpy today. Just didn't sleep well, Sarah lied, forcing a smile. Storm kept me up. The doctor nodded sympathetically. That was a bad one. Power still out in some neighborhoods. Sarah thought of the generator that had mysteriously appeared outside her house, humming efficiently even when the rest of her block had gone dark. Another debt paid without her asking. By her third shift back, Sarah had almost convinced herself that life could return to something resembling normal. The burner phone remained silent, tucked into her purse, but ever present. No more mysterious deliveries had arrived at her door. Perhaps Michael Coretti had moved on, his debt to her discharged with an expensive sofa. Then she saw the black sedan parked across from the hospital staff entrance. It was there when she arrived for her shift at 7 a.m., still there when she stepped out for lunch at 1:30 p.m., still there when she left at 7:45 p.m., exhausted after a multi-car pileup had sent 17 patients to the emergency department in a single hour. The same car followed her at a discreet distance all the way home, maintaining exactly 3 car lengths between them at all times. Professional, unobtrusive, unmistakable. Sarah was being watch-protected, Michael would probably call it. The distinction felt meaningless. She was so focused on the sedan behind her that she almost missed the unfamiliar car parked in front of her house. Not black and sleek like the Coretti vehicles, but a nondescript gray compact with tinted windows. As she pulled into her driveway, the gray car's engine started. The black sedan following her suddenly accelerated, cutting off the gray car as it attempted to pull away from the curb. Sarah watched in her rearview mirror, frozen with shock, as 2 men emerged from the sedan. Their movements coordinated and precise. One positioned himself at the gray car's driver's side, one at the passenger's. No weapons visible, but their stance made it clear they were armed. A brief, tense conversation ensued, too far away for Sarah to hear. Then the gray car reversed sharply and sped away, the black sedan making no move to follow. One of the men, tall, with close-cropped blonde hair, approached her car as she sat paralyzed in her driveway. "Ms. Winters," he said, touching 2 fingers to his forehead in a gesture that wasn't quite a salute. "You should go inside. We've handled the situation." "What situation?" Sarah found her voice, anger temporarily overriding fear. "Who were those people?" "Just some interested parties," the man replied with professional blandness. "Nothing for you to worry about. This is my house," Sarah hissed, getting out of her car. "Everything that happens here is something for me to worry about." The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Coretti would prefer you remain uninvolved in these matters." "Well, Mr. Coretti doesn't get to decide what I prefer," Sarah snapped, her patience finally breaking. "Tell him if he wants to station his goons outside my house. The least he can do is explain why." A flash of something, amusement, maybe respect, crossed the man's face. "I'll convey your message, Ms. Winters." He retreated to the black sedan, which pulled away smoothly, only to park half a block down the street, still visible, still watching. Inside, Sarah leaned against her front door, heart pounding. She should be terrified. She should call the police. She should pack a bag and flee to her sister's place in Colorado. Instead, she pulled out the burner phone, staring at it for a long moment before pressing the single programmed number. It rang once before a familiar voice answered. "Sarah?" Michael Coretti said, as if he'd been expecting her call. "Is everything all right?" "No," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Everything is not all right. There are men following me, watching my house. Someone was parked outside just now, and your people intercepted them." "The Moretti family is very persistent," Michael said after a brief pause. "They've realized you have a connection to me." "I don't have a connection to you," Sarah protested. "I treated a wound. That's it. In my world, Sarah, that's enough." His voice was gentle but unyielding. "They've marked you now, which means I need to ask you a question." Sarah closed her eyes, already dreading whatever was coming next. "What question?" "How attached are you to your current life?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to face. "What does that mean?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "It means," Michael said carefully, "that I'd like to offer you a job." "A job?" Sarah repeated, wondering if she'd misheard. "What kind of job could you possibly offer me?" "The kind that keeps you alive," Michael replied matter-of-factly. "Medical advisor to the Coretti family." Sarah's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You're joking." "I never joke about business, Sarah." She sank onto her new leather sofa, suddenly overwhelmed. "Let me get this straight. You want me to quit my legitimate nursing career to become what's your personal mob doctor?" "Mob is such an antiquated term," Michael said, and she could almost hear the wry smile in his voice. "We prefer organization or family. The semantics aren't really my concern here. Your concern should be the Moretti family," Michael said, his tone shifting to something harder. "They don't make distinctions between associates and innocent bystanders." "Car outside your house tonight?" "Those weren't friendly visitors." A chill ran through Sarah. "What did they want?" "Information, initially, then leverage. Eventually, they would have taken you." The clinical way he stated these facts was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been dramatic about it, like a doctor outlining the inevitable progression of a terminal disease. "And your job offer is supposed to protect me from that?" "Yes," Michael said simply. "As an official employee of the Coretti family, you'd be under our full protection. More importantly, your status would be recognized by other organizations. Taking you would become an explicit declaration of war rather than merely ... collateral damage." Sarah pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to process what she was hearing. "This is insane. I can't just drop everything and become a criminal." "I'm not asking you to become a criminal," Michael corrected. "I'm offering you a position as medical consultant to my legitimate businesses with some Additional responsibilities regarding the health of key personnel. Personnel who can't go to hospitals, Sarah filled in, because they've been shot or stabbed or whatever else happens in your world. Precisely. And if I refuse? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. I can continue to provide security, Michael finally said, but without a formal affiliation, you'll always be vulnerable. The Morettis are persistent, and they're not the only family in Chicago with an interest in getting. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to imagine returning to her normal routine with the knowledge that faceless enemies might be waiting. Even if Michael's protection held, how long could she live like that? I need time to think, she said. Of course, Michael agreed, but not too much time. The situation is evolving. After they hung up, Sarah sat motionless on her sofa, staring at nothing. Her training had prepared her for emergency situations, for making split-second decisions that could save lives. But this was different. This was her life, her future, her moral compass. She was still sitting there when her doorbell rang an hour later. Through the peephole, Sarah saw a woman, slender, elegantly dressed in a tailored pantsuit with short dark hair and an expression of restrained impatience. Not another delivery person, and definitely not someone from her neighborhood. Who is it? Sarah called through the door. Luciana Coretti, the woman replied. Michael's sister. May I come in? Sarah hesitated, but curiosity won out. She opened the door, noting the black sedan still parked down the street and another identical one now parked directly in front of her house. Luciana Coretti swept in with the confidence of someone used to commanding rooms much larger and more intimidating than Sarah's modest living room. She scanned the space with a quick, assessing glance before turning her attention to Sarah. So you're the nurse, she said, her tone revealing nothing of her thoughts. And you're the sister, Sarah replied, matching her coolness. Unexpectedly, Luciana smiled. I'd see why Michael is intrigued. You're not easily intimidated. I work in a Chicago emergency room, Sarah said dryly. It takes more than a designer suit and a fancy car to intimidate me. Good. You'll need that backbone if you accept my brother's offer. Luciana moved further into the living room, examining the new sofa with a critical eye. I'd have chosen the burgundy leather, but this isn't bad. Did you come here to critique my furniture? Sarah asked, crossing her arms. I came to assess you, Luciana replied with disarming honesty, and to answer the questions you're too smart to ask my brother directly. That caught Sarah off guard. What questions? Whether his offer is genuine, what it really entails, if you have any actual choice in the matter. Luciana turned to face her fully. The answers are yes. Exactly what he told you, and more than you think. Sarah studied the other woman, looking for signs of deception but finding none. Why would your family want to random a nurse? You're hardly random, Sarah. You have specialized trauma training, experience with gunshot wounds and stabbings, and a proven ability to work under pressure. More importantly, you've already demonstrated loyalty by saving my brother and not calling the police. That wasn't loyalty, Sarah objected. That was medical ethics. Luciana waved this distinction away. The result is the same. You kept him alive and kept your mouth shut. In our world, actions matter more than intention. Sarah sank back onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. What happens if I say no? Luciana's expression softened marginally. Contrary to what you might think, we don't force people to work for us or eliminate those who refuse. But we also can't expend unlimited resources protecting someone who won't become part of the family. So you just withdraw your protection. Eventually, yes. After helping you relocate, perhaps with a new identity if necessary. Relocate? Sarah repeated, the word hitting her like a physical blow. Leave Chicago, my job, my friends, everything? It would be the safest option, Luciana confirmed. Once you've been marked by a family like the Morettis, that attention doesn't simply disappear. Sarah thought of the life she'd built in Chicago, her career at Memorial, her small circle of friends, the community she'd become part of after her divorce. The thought of abandoning it all made her physically ill. And if I say yes, she asked quietly. You'd be compensated generously, Luciana said. All business now. Living arrangements would be provided in a secure building owned by the family. You'd maintain your hospital position, but with a more flexible schedule to accommodate your new responsibilities. Your student loans would be paid in full. Sarah's head snapped up at that last item. She'd never mentioned her student loans to Michael or anyone else in the Coretti organization. Reading her expression, Luciana smiled. We're thorough, Sarah. We know about the $130,000 in medical school debt. We know about your ex-husband's gambling that nearly bankrupted for the divorce. We know about your sister in Colorado and your parents in Florida. The message was clear. There was nowhere Sarah could go. No aspect of her life the Corettis couldn't reach. Why me? She whispered. There must be doctors already in your organization. There are, Luciana acknowledged, but you saved Michael's life when you had every reason not. That kind of instinctive compassion, valuable. She moved toward the door, apparently having said what she came to say. Michael will call tomorrow for your answer. For what it's worth, she added, pausing with her hand on the doorknob. I think you'd do well with us. Better than trying to outrun what's already begun. After Luciana left, Sarah stood at her window watching the black sedan pull away, leaving the other car still keeping silent vigil over her house. She was trapped not by locked doors or physical restraints, but by invisible lines of power and obligation that had been drawn around her life the moment she stepped out into that storm. Sarah barely slept that night, her mind cycling through scenarios, each more impossible than the last. By dawn, she'd made her decision, the only one that made sense given her limited options. When the burner phone rang at precisely 8 a.m., she was already dressed for work, a cup of coffee cooling untouched on her kitchen counter. "Yes," she said without preamble when she answered. There was a brief pause. "Yes to what, Sarah?" Michael's voice was calm, measured, giving nothing away. "Yes to your job offer," she clarified, her own voice steadier than she expected. "But I have conditions." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm listening. I keep my job at Memorial. I choose which cases I treat for your ... organization. And I don't participate in anything illegal beyond providing medical care. Those terms are acceptable." Michael said so quickly that Sarah suspected he'd anticipated her requirements. "Anything else?" She took a deep breath. "Yes. I want to know why the Morettis are after you. The real reason." This time the silence stretched so long she thought he might have hung up. "That's not related to your position," he finally said. "It is if it's the reason people are watching my house," Sarah countered. "I'm not asking for all your secrets, Michael. Just the one that's directly endangering my life." She heard him exhale slowly, the sound of a man making calculations. "Not over the phone. We'll discuss it in person." "When?" "Tonight. A car will pick you up after your shift. Pack an overnight bag." "I'm not moving in with you," Sarah protested. "The security assessment of your current residence is ... inadequate," Michael replied, professional and detached. "Until proper measures can be implemented. You'll stay at a secure location." Before she could argue further, he added, "This isn't negotiable, Sarah. Not if you want to survive." The line went dead, leaving her staring at the silent phone. Memorial Hospital seemed surreally normal after the chaos of her personal life. Sarah moved through her shift in a daze, triaging patients, starting IVs, administering medications. The familiar routines should have been comforting, but instead felt like play acting, as if she were merely going through the motions of her former life. Dr. Patel caught her reapplying a blood pressure cuff to the same patient for the third time. "Winters, you with us today?" "Sorry," she mumbled. "Didn't sleep well." The doctor studied her face with professional concern. "Maybe you should take some time off. You've barely used any vacation days in the 3 years I've known." Sarah forced a smile. "I'm fine, just distracted." "Woman troubles?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Something like that," she replied, the irony of his misunderstanding almost making her laugh despite everything. By the end of her shift, Sarah was exhausted, her nerves frayed from constantly scanning the emergency department for unfamiliar faces, for anyone who might be watching her too closely. The black sedan was waiting exactly where Michael had promised, idling discreetly near the staff entrance. The driver, not Dante, but another of Michael's seemingly endless supply of security personnel, opened the door for her without speaking. The car took her to a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan, the kind of luxury building Sarah had walked past countless times without imagining what might exist inside. The doorman nodded respectfully as the driver escorted her through a private entrance to a dedicated elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. "M.R. Coretti is waiting upstairs," the driver said, handing her the key card as the elevator doors closed. The penthouse apartment occupied the entire top floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the lake and city skyline. The space was immaculately decorated in masculine tones of gray and navy, elegant without being ostentatious. Sarah had expected something showier, more stereotypically mob boss. Gold fixtures perhaps, or gaudy artwork. Instead, the clean lines and understated luxury spoke of refined taste and old money. Michael was standing at the window when she entered, his back to her, silhouetted against the fading evening light. He'd clearly healed significantly in the weeks since she'd treated his gunshot wound, his posture straight and strong as he gazed out at the city. "Your home is beautiful," Sarah said, setting down her overnight bag. "This isn't my home," Michael replied, turning to face her. "It's a safe house, one of several properties maintained for security purposes." He looked different in this setting, more contained, more powerful. He wore a simple black sweater and dark slacks, casual yet impeccably tailored. The vulnerability she'd glimpsed when he was injured had vanished, replaced by a cool self-possession that both intimidated and, to her surprise, attracted her. "You look better," she observed, medical assessment in easier territory than the complicated emotions swirling beneath the surface. "Thanks to you," he acknowledged with a slight incline of his head. "Would you like a drink? The bar is fully stocked." "I'd rather have answers," Sarah replied. "You promised to tell me why the Morettis are after you." Michael gestured to the sofa. "Please. Sit, might take some time." He waited until she was seated before joining her, maintaining a respectful distance. "What do you know about shipping routes into Chicago?" "Nothing," Sarah admitted. "Why would I? The Moretti and Coretti families have controlled different aspects of Chicago's shipping industry for 3 generations. Michael explained. "An uneasy balance of power maintained through carefully negotiated territories and profit-sharing arrangements. Until Thomas Moretti's son Vincent decided to bypass those arrangements." Michael's expression darkened. 6 months ago, they began moving product through our channels without proper authorization or compensation." "Product," Sarah repeated. "You mean drugs?" "Among other things. So this is about money," she said, disappointed but not surprised. "They cut into your profits and now people are dying over it." If it were just about money, we could have reached an accommodation, Michael replied, his voice hardening. This is about what they were bringing in, a new synthetic opioid, 10 times more potent than fentanyl. They've been distributing it to the same neighborhoods where my family has spent decades building legitimate businesses, providing jobs, supporting communities. Sarah stared at him, trying to reconcile this apparent concern for community welfare with her understanding of what organized crime families did. You expect me to believe you care about drug addiction in poor neighborhoods? Believe what you want, Michael said evenly. But the Coretti family has rules. No dealing to children, no trafficking in persons, no distributing drugs that devastate the communities we depend on for our legitimate operations. And the Morettis broke those rules. They shattered them. For a moment, genuine anger flashed in Michael's eyes before he controlled it. The night you found me, I had just discovered one of their distribution centers. There was a confrontation, you got shot, Sarah filled in. An unintended complication, he said with a dismissive gesture. But now they believe I have something that belongs to them, information about their supply chain, their contacts with the cartel. They want it back. Do you have that information? Michael's smile was cold. Yes. The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind. That's why they're watching me. They think you told me something or gave me something that night. Initially, yes, Michael confirmed. Now they've realized you have value to me personally, which makes you both a target and an asset to them. Value to you personally? Sarah repeated, feeling heat rise in her cheeks despite herself. Michael studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You saved my life at considerable risk to your own. You've shown loyalty, discretion, and remarkable courage under pressure. Those qualities are exceedingly rare in my experience. That's not what you meant, Sarah said quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Surprise, perhaps respect. No, he admitted. It's not. The tension between them was suddenly palpable, charged with something beyond the danger and intrigue of their circumstances. Sarah found herself acutely aware of his proximity, of the strength evident in his controlled movements, of the intensity in his gaze. Before either could speak again, the door to the penthouse opened. Dante entered, his expression grave. Sir, he said, addressing Michael but glancing at Sarah. We have a situation. Michael stood immediately. All business once more. What kind of situation? The Moretti enforcer, Salvatore. He's been seen near the hospital asking questions about Winters. Sarah felt her blood run cold. What kind of question? Dante's expression confirmed her fears before he spoke. About your schedule, your friends, and whether you have any family in Chicago. Sarah's first instinct was to call her parents, but Michael's hand on her arm stopped her. Your family's already being watched, he said quietly. We placed security details on them the night you brought me in. You what? Sarah stared at him, caught between outrage and grudging relief. It was a necessary precaution, Michael replied, unapologetic. Your parents in Florida have 2 men stationed nearby. Your sister in Colorado the same. You've been surveilling my family for weeks and never thought to mention it. Would it have helped you sleep better? Michael countered. Before Sarah could respond, Dante cleared his throat. The immediate concern is Salvatore. He's been recruiting local muscles, suggesting he's planning something beyond surveillance. Michael nodded, his expression hardening into something cold and businesslike. Increase security on this building. Move Miss Winters' family to the secondary locations we prepared, and find out who Salvatore's been talking to at the hospital. Already in progress. Sir. Dante's efficiency was almost frightening to Sarah. These men operated like a military unit, anticipating threats and neutralizing them with practiced precision. When Dante left, Michael turned back to Sarah. I'm sorry you've been dragged into this, he said, and to her surprise, he actually sounded sincere. This isn't what I wanted. What did you want? She asked, genuinely curious. He seemed to consider the question carefully. I wanted to repay a debt, to ensure your safety, and perhaps, single quotes. He paused, choosing his words with unusual care. Perhaps to know the kind of woman who would risk everything to save a stranger. There was something disarming about his honesty, something that cut through Sarah's fear and anger. I'm a nurse, she said simply. Helping people is what I do. Even people like me? The question hung between them, layered with meaning Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to confront. I didn't know who you were that night, she reminded him. And now that you do? Sarah hesitated, searching for the truth beneath her complicated feelings. Now I'm not sure who you are at all, she admitted. The man bleeding on my couch, the businessman who sent me a new sofa, the crime boss discussing territories. Which one is the real Michael Coretti? His lips curved in a faint smile. All of them, none of them. We all wear different faces for different aspects of our lives, don't we? Not like this. Sarah gestured to the luxurious penthouse, the implied violence of their conversation about the Moretti. My different faces don't include ordering people to secondary locations or placing surveillance on Famo, Michael acknowledged. Your different faces are all fundamentally good, I think. That's a luxury my position doesn't allow. Before Sarah could respond to this unexpected insight, Michael's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. You need to move. No. What's happening? Salvatore has made contact with one of your coworkers. A doctor, Patel. Sarah's blood ran cold. Daniel? But why would he? People can be persuaded to cooperate in various ways, Michael said carefully. Money, threats, blackmail. Daniel wouldn't sell me out, Sarah insisted, but even as she said it, she remembered his unusual interest in her whereabouts that afternoon, his probing questions about her personal life. Michael studied her face. You're not sure, are you? I thought I knew him, Sarah said quietly. We've worked together for 3 years. 3 years is nothing, Michael replied, not unkindly. How much do any of us really know about the people in our lives? The masks they wear, the secrets they keep? It was a chilling thought, one that made Sarah question everything, her colleagues, her friends, even her own judgment. If she could be so wrong about Daniel, what else had she missed? What happens now? She asked. We confirm Patel's involved, then take appropriate action. The clinical detachment in his voice sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. What does appropriate action mean in your world, Michael? He held her gaze steadily. It means whatever is necessary to ensure your safety. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, Sarah said firmly. Even someone who betrayed you to people who would kidnap or kill you. Sarah hesitated, her moral certainties suddenly less clear than they'd been before. Even then, there must be other ways to handle this. Michael's expression softened marginally. Your compassion is admirable if impractical, but I'll respect your wishes as much as circumstances allow. It wasn't exactly the assurance she wanted, but Sarah suspected it was the best she was going to get. They relocated to another Coretti property, a modernist glass and steel structure overlooking the river, even more heavily secured than the Lakeview penthouse. Sarah watched the city lights blur through the tinted windows of Michael's car, wondering how her life had spiraled so dramatically in such a short time. The new safe house had a medical suite that rivaled some hospital departments, surgical equipment, monitoring systems, a pharmacy stocked with everything from basic antibiotics to controlled substances that would have required extensive licensing in any legitimate facility. Your domain, Michael said, showing her the space. Should the need arise, Sarah ran her fingers over a surgical tray, the familiar instruments giving her an odd sense of comfort amidst all the strangeness. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? I prefer to be prepared for all contingencies, he replied, neither confirming nor denying her suspicion. And I'm just another contingency? The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing more vulnerability than she'd intended. Michael studied her for a long moment. No, Sarah. You're something I didn't prepare for. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. The moment was shattered by the arrival of Dante, his usual composure replaced by urgent purpose. Sir, we have confirmation on Patel. He's been feeding information to Salvatore for at least a week. Nature of the connection? Michael asked. Financial, Dante replied. Gambling debts to a casino the Moretti's control? Sarah felt sick. Daniel, with his kind smile and gentle bedside manner, had sold her out over gambling debts. How many times had he asked about her schedule, her plans, under the guise of friendly conversation? He knows I'm working a double shift tomorrow, she realized aloud. I told him this morning when he asked if I wanted to grab dinner after work. Michael and Dante exchanged looks. They'll make their move then, Michael said, when they think they can predict your location for an extended period. So what do we do? Sarah asked, her nursing training kicking in. Assess the situation, develop a plan, implement solutions. Michael's smile was cold but appreciative. We give them exactly what they're expecting. And then we end this. End it how? Sarah pressed. Not sure she wanted to hear the answer. By showing the Morettis that taking what belongs to the Coretti family has consequences, Michael replied, his voice hardening. Permanent ones. It wasn't until later, lying awake in the luxurious guest bedroom of the safe house, that Sarah fully processed his words. What belongs to the Coretti family? She wasn't sure when she had become property, a possession to be defended, or why the thought didn't disturb her as much as it should have. Morning brought a strange sense of clarity to Sarah. Perhaps it was the quality of light streaming through the safe house windows. Or perhaps it was simply the forced adaptation that follows any life-altering crisis. Whatever the cause, she found herself moving with newfound purpose as she prepared for her role in Michael's plan. You understand what's required? Michael asked as they reviewed the details over breakfast. The domestic normality of sharing coffee and toast felt surreal against the backdrop of their conversation. I go to work as scheduled, Sarah recited. Act normal. Let Daniel believe I'm completely unaware of his betrayal. Work my double shift as planned. Michael nodded, his expression grave. My people will be positioned throughout the hospital. Dante will coordinate security from a van in the parking garage with full visual coverage of all entrances. And when Salvatore makes his move, we'll be ready. The cold certainty in Michael's voice should have frightened her. Instead, Sarah found it oddly reassuring. What exactly does ready mean? She pressed, needing to understand the full extent of what she was participating in. Michael studied her for a long moment. It means we'll prevent them from taking you, and we'll ensure they don't try again. Without killing anyone, Sarah reminded him. It was the one condition she'd insisted on, the moral line she refused to cross even in these extreme circumstances. If possible, Michael agreed, though something in his expression told her he considered this promise conditional at best. Sarah arrived at Memorial for her shift precisely on schedule, moving through the familiar corridors with heightened awareness of her surrounding. Every face, every voice, every shadow seemed to hold potential threat. She felt the weight of unseen eyes, both those protecting her and those hunting her. Daniel Patel greeted her with his usual friendly smile, no hint of guilt or deception visible in his expression. Winters, ready for the marathon shift? He asked, falling into step beside her as they headed toward the emergency department. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, amazed at how steady her voice sounded despite knowing this man had sold her out to people who wanted to kidnap or kill her. "Any plans for your time off after? You've earned some rest after a double." The casual fishing for information made Sarah's skin crawl. "Nothing special, probably just catch up on sleep." Throughout the morning, she moved through her duties with mechanical precision, treating patients, documenting care, maintaining the appearance of normalcy, while constantly scanning for unfamiliar faces or unusual activity. Twice she spotted Michael's men, once at triage, posing as a patient with a minor laceration, and again near the ambulance bay, wearing maintenance uniforms while pretending to repair lighting fixtures. By mid-afternoon, the weight of the charade was beginning to wear on her. The constant vigilance, the pretense of normalcy, the betrayal by a trusted colleague, all of it pressed down on Sarah until each breath felt like an effort. She was checking a patient's IV when Daniel appeared beside her, his expression unusually serious. "Sarah, can I talk to you a minute? In private?" Her heart rate doubled instantly. "I'm a little busy right now," she hedged, glancing around for the nearest of Michael's men. "It's important," Daniel insisted, his hand closing around her wrist with unexpected firmness. "Staff room. 2 minutes." Sarah's training kicked in. "Don't escalate, don't show fear, maintain normalcy until backup can respond." "Fine," she agreed, carefully extricating her wrist from his grip. "Let me finish with this patient first." She took her time completing the forecheck, using the moments to catch the eye of one of Michael's men near the nurse's station. A subtle nod confirmed he'd seen the exchange and understood the potential threat. The staff room was empty when she entered, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the instant furniture. Daniel stood by the coffee machine, his back to the door, shoulders tense. "What's so important?" Sarah asked, positioning herself near the exit, maintaining escape routes just as Michael had instructed. Daniel turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I know what's going on, Sarah." Her mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The men watching you. The car that follows you home." He took a step closer. "I know who Michael Coretti is." Sarah forced her face to remain neutral, even as her mind raced through possible responses. "Who?" "Don't," Daniel said sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending you don't know. The Corettis don't send security details for people they aren't deeply invested in." "Daniel, I didn't have a choice," he interrupted, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "They have information about my brother, things that could put him away for years." The revelation caught Sarah off guard. "Your brother? He got mixed up with the wrong people, made some bad decisions. The Morettis found out." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine distress. "I had to give them something. I'm sorry." Sarah studied him, her nurse's training helping her read the physical signs of his anxiety-dilated pupils, perspiration at the temples, the slight tremor in his hands. His fear was real, but that didn't make his betrayal any less dangerous. "What did they ask you to do today?" she asked quietly. Daniel's eyes darted to the door, then back to her face. "Tell them when you take your dinner break. Guide you to the east stairwell instead of the cafeteria. They have people waiting there." "And you were going to do it?" "I don't know," he admitted, the confession seeming to drain him. "I've been trying to figure a way out all morning, so I brought you here." To warn you, Sarah wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that had worked alongside this man for 3 years desperately, wanted to trust that he was telling the truth. But Michael's voice echoed in her mind. "How much do any of us really know about the people in our lives?" "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, maintaining her distance. "Because I saw them," Daniel replied, his voice breaking slightly. "The men they sent, they're not just here for you, Sarah. They have orders to eliminate witnesses afterward. Including me. Single quotes before Sarah could respond, the door opened behind her. One of Michael's men, the fake maintenance worker, stepped into the room, his hand beneath his jacket in a posture that left little doubt about what he was reaching for. "Miss Winters," he said calmly, "there's a call for you at the front desk. Urgent." The code phrase. Michael signaled that the trap had been sprung. "I need to take that," Sarah told Daniel, backing toward the door. "Whatever you're planning to do, Daniel, don't, for both our sakes." "It's too late," he whispered, real fear in his eyes now. "They're already here." As if summoned by his words, the hospital's fire alarm began to wail, its piercing sound cutting through the relative quiet of the emergency department. Within seconds, chaos erupted as staff began ushering patients toward evacuation. "This wasn't the plan," the security man muttered, his hand now openly holding a concealed weapon. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded, but the answer came in the form of gunshots, distant but unmistakable, echoing from somewhere near the hospital's east entrance. The trap had indeed been sprung, but Sarah suddenly realized with sickening clarity that they weren't the ones who had set it. Chaos erupted in the emergency department as staff followed evacuation protocols, moving patients toward designated exits. The security man Sarah now knew his name was Torres, pulled her away from Daniel, guiding her against the flow of evacuating personnel. "We need to get you to the west exit," he muttered. "Dante has a vehicle waiting." "What about Daniel?" Sarah asked, glancing back at her colleague who stood frozen in the staff room doorway. "Not our concern," Torres replied coldly. Another burst of gunfire, closer now, punctuated his words. Patients and staff screamed, some dropping to the floor while others ran in panicked confusion. "Wait," Sarah pulled against Torres's grip. "My patients are being evacuated by hospital staff." Cut her off. "Your safety is the priority." Sarah's training warred with her self-preservation instinct. She'd sworn an oath to do no harm, to prioritize patient welfare above all else. But she'd also seen firsthand what the Morettis were capable of. The decision was taken from her when 3 men in nondescript clothes entered the emergency department from the east corridor, their posture and vigilant scanning immediately marking them as something other than hospital personnel. The lead man locked eyes with Sarah, a flash of recognition confirming her worst fears. "Run," Torres ordered, pulling his weapon and positioning himself between Sarah and the approaching threat. She didn't need to be told twice. Sarah sprinted toward the west corridor, using her intimate knowledge of the hospital layout to navigate through service areas and staff passages. Behind her, she heard shouts followed by more gunfire. The hospital was in complete disarray, fire alarms blaring, security personnel rushing in the opposite direction, staff trying to maintain order while evacuating patients. Sarah ducked into a supply closet, pressing herself against the wall as heavy footsteps passed by outside. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Not her personal phone, the burner Michael had given her. "Where are you?" Michael's voice was tightly controlled, but she could hear the tension beneath it. "Supply closet, second floor, west wing," Sarah whispered. "Torres's, I don't know if he's alive. There are at least 3 Moretti men inside the building. Stay where you are." "I'm coming to you, Michael. The hospital's crawling with Moretti's people. It's too dangerous. That's why I'm coming personally." The line went dead before she could argue further. Sarah leaned back against the shelving, trying to calm her racing heart. The cramped closet smelled of antiseptic and latex, familiar scents that usually brought comfort but now felt claustrophobic. Through the door, she could hear the continued chaos, shouted orders, hurried footsteps, distant sirens as first responders arrived. Minutes stretched like hours. Sarah found herself cataloging the supplies around her, professional instinct taking inventory of gauze, bandages, antiseptic solutions, materials she might need if the situation deteriorated further. The door handle turned slowly. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the shadows, gripping a heavy metal bedpan as her only available weapon. "Sarah?" Michael's voice, barely audible. She lunged forward, pulling open the door just enough to let him slip inside. He was alone, his expensive suit incongruous in the sterile hospital environment. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately, eyes scanning her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, but the Morettis came prepared. Michael finished grimly. "They've been planning this for weeks. Daniel wasn't their only source inside Memorial." "What do you mean?" "They have people in administration, security, even the maintenance staff." Michael's expression was coldly furious. "They used our trap against us. When we positioned our people, they were watching, waiting." "How do we get out?" Sarah asked, focusing on the immediate problem. "Service elevator to the basement, then through the maintenance tunnels to the parking garage." Michael checked his watch. "Dante is repositioning as we speak, but we need to move now." Sarah nodded, mentally mapping their route through the hospital's labyrinthine infrastructure. "I know the way." They slipped out of the supply closet, moving swiftly but cautiously down the deserted corridor. Most of the hospital had been evacuated, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the distant wail of sirens and the continued drone of the fire alarm. They were halfway to the service elevator when gunfire erupted behind them. Michael shoved Sarah forward, turning to return fire in one fluid motion. The precision of his movement spoke of training and experience that Sarah preferred not to contemplate. "Go," he ordered, backing up as he provided covering fire. Sarah ran, Michael close behind her, navigating the maze of corridors toward the service elevator. They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with 2 of Moretti's men. The next moments blurred into a chaotic sequence, Michael moving with startling speed, disarming one man with a precise strike while firing at the second. The first man fell, clutching his throat. The second managed to squeeze off a shot before Michael's bullet found its mark. The report was deafening in the confined space. Sarah felt a spray of warm liquid across her face, followed by Michael's grunt of pain. He staggered, one hand pressing against his side where his shirt was rapidly darkening with blood. "Michael," she caught him as he stumbled, supporting his weight just as she had on that first stormy night. "I'm fine," he said through gritted teeth, though the pallor of his skin belied his words. "We need to keep moving." Sarah's nurse's training kicked in. "Let me see," she insisted, already guiding him into a nearby examination room. "There's no time," Michael protested, but his voice was weakening, his normally commanding presence diminished by pain and blood loss. "Make time," Sarah replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're no good to either of us, Dad." The wound was serious, but not immediately life-threatening. The bullet had torn through his side, missing vital organs but causing significant bleeding. Sarah worked quickly, applying pressure dressings from the exam room supplies. "This is familiar," Michael said with a strained smile, watching her work. "You getting shot and me patching you up?" Sarah tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. "It's becoming a habit I'd like to break." Outside, a new sound joined the cacophony of alarms and distant gunfire. The low, ominous rumble of thunder. A spring storm was moving in, mirroring the chaos within the hospital walls. "Appropriate weather for our reunion," Michael commented, wincing as he tested his weight. Sarah helped him stand, once again bearing his weight as she had that first night. "Can you walk?" "I don't have much choice," he replied, his arm around her shoulders. warm blood seeping through the inadequate bandage. Together they made their way to the service elevator, each step a careful negotiation of pain and balance. As the doors closed behind them, Sarah caught a glimpse of their reflection in the polished metal interior, her scrubs spattered with blood. Michael's face drawn with pain, their postures locked in mutual support. "We can't keep doing this," she said quietly. Michael's eyes met hers in the reflection. "Which part? The getting shot or the running for our lives?" "All of it," Sarah replied, feeling the weight of the past weeks pressing down on her. "There has to be an end somewhere." "There is," Michael agreed, his voice hardening despite his injury. When Salvatore Moretti is no longer a threat, the elevator descended into the hospital's basement level, carrying them deeper into darkness as thunder rumbled overhead, the storm drawing ever closer. The basement level of Memorial Hospital was a maze of utility corridors, storage areas, and maintenance tunnels. A subterranean labyrinth rarely seen by patients or most medical staff. Sarah moved with surprising confidence through the dimly lit passages, one arm supporting Michael as they navigated toward the parking garage access tunnel. "How do you know this route so well?" Michael asked, his breathing labored but controlled. "3 years of sneaking away for quick breaks during overnight shifts," Sarah replied, guiding him around a corner. "Sometimes the only peace you can find in a hospital is underground." The distant rumble of thunder reverberated through the concrete walls around them, the coming storm making its presence known even this far below ground. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow, transforming the utilitarian space into something almost otherworldly. "Dante should be waiting at the south exit," Michael said, checking his phone. "No signal down here." "We're almost there," Sarah assured him, though her own confidence was wavering. The bandage on Michael's side was already soaked through, and his skin felt clammy under her supporting arm. He needed proper medical attention, not this desperate flight through service tunnel. A noise behind them, footsteps hurried and purposeful, sent adrenaline surging through Sarah's system. "In here," she whispered, pulling Michael into a maintenance closet barely large enough for both of them. The close quarters forced them chest to chest, Michael's labored breathing warm against her cheek as they listened to the footsteps approach, then past their hiding place. "They're between us and the exit," Michael murmured, his voice a mere vibration she felt more than heard. Sarah nodded, her mind racing through alternatives. "There's another way, through the old pneumatic tube system room. It connects to the original building foundation with access to the street level." "Lead on," Michael said, his trust in her navigation implicit. They slipped back into the corridor, moving in the opposite direction from the footsteps. Sarah guided them through increasingly narrow and neglected passages, deeper into the oldest parts of the hospital's infrastructure. "Here," she said finally, stopping before a heavy metal door marked "Tube System, Authorized Personnel Only." The pneumatic delivery system had been decommissioned years ago, replaced by digital ordering and human couriers, but the infrastructure remained embedded in the building's bones. Inside, the room was a relic of bygone hospital efficiency, wall-mounted tubes snaking in all directions, ancient control panels covered in dust, ceiling-high racks of metal canisters once used to transport medication orders and lab samples throughout the building. "There," Sarah pointed to a maintenance hatch in the far corner. "That leads to the original foundation access tunnel. It comes out near the ambulance bay." Michael leaned heavily against a control panel, his face alarmingly pale in the emergency lighting. "Sarah," he said, his voice strained, "I need to tell you something. In case we don't save it." She cut him off, her nurse's instincts reading the dangerous signs of his deteriorating condition. "Tell me when we're safe." She helped him toward the hatch, every step clearly causing him pain despite his attempts to hide it. The man who had seemed so invulnerable, so controlled in every situation, was now dependent on her strength to survive, just as he had been on that first stormy night. The parallels weren't lost on Sarah. Twice now she had chosen to save this man's life, knowing exactly who and what he was. What did that make her? The hatch was heavier than she expected, requiring both of them to pull it open. The tunnel beyond was narrow and dark, forcing them to proceed single file, Michael's hand gripping the back of her scrubs as she led the way. "How far?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. 50 yards. Maybe less," Sarah replied, one hand trailing along the rough concrete wall for guidance. "And there should be a ladder at the end leading to a maintenance door near the ambulance bay." Thunder crashed overhead, so close now that Sarah felt the vibration through the foundations. The storm had arrived in full force, and they were about to emerge directly into it. They reached the ladder just as Michael's phone regained signal, buzzing with a cascade of messages. He checked it one-handed, still leaning against Sarah for support. "Dante's been compromised," he said grimly. "Salvatore has met at every exit. What about your other security, engaged elsewhere?" The clinical euphemism left little doubt about what Michael's men were doing in other parts of the hospital. Sarah assessed their options with the pragmatism of an emergency nurse accustomed to triage decision. "You've lost too much blood. You need medical attention now, not after some dramatic escape attempt." "I'm not going to a hospital," Michael insisted. "We're already in a hospital," Sarah pointed out. "I can treat you properly in the surgical suite on the 3rd floor. It's likely been evacuated with the rest of the building." Michael studied her face in the dim light. "You're suggesting we go back inside? With Moretti's men searching every floor? It's that, or you bleed out waiting for your people to secure an exit." Sarah's tone left no room for argument. "Your call, but make it fast." A hint of something like admiration flickered in Michael's eyes. "Lead the way, Nurse Winters." They climbed the ladder slowly, Michael's strength clearly flagging with each rung. At the top, Sarah eased open the access door, emerging into a service corridor just off the ambulance bay. As predicted, the area had been evacuated, though distant voices suggested security personnel were still present elsewhere in the building. Rain lashed against the windows, sheets of water cascading down the glass as lightning illuminated the darkened corridor in strobing bursts. The storm had transformed day into a premature, tempestuous twilight. "Third floor," Sarah whispered, supporting more of Michael's weight with each step. "We can take the service stairs. They're less likely to be watched than the main stairwells." They had just reached the stairs when Michael suddenly stiffened, pulling Sarah to a halt. "Wait," he said, his voice dropping to a bare whisper. "Listen." Through the howling of the storm and the continued blare of alarms, Sarah heard voices approaching from the corridor ahead. One voice in particular stood out, its tone commanding and coldly furious. "Find them," the voice ordered. "Check every floor, every closet, every damn air duct if you have to. I want Coretti," and the nurse found within the hour. Michael's expression hardened. "Salvatore," he murmured, recognition and hatred mingling in his voice. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain soaking through her scrubs from their brief exposure near the ambulance bay. They were trapped between the approaching Moretti enforcer and the storm raging outside, with nowhere left to run. Michael straightened with visible effort, one hand pressed to his bleeding side, the other reaching inside his jacket. "Get behind me," he ordered, his voice suddenly strong despite his injury. "You can barely stand," Sarah protested. "I can do what needs to be done," Michael replied, the cold determination in his eyes reminding her forcefully of who and what he truly was. Before either could move, lightning struck with a deafening crack somewhere very close to the hospital. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the corridor into complete darkness. Darkness enveloped them, absolute and disorient. The hospital's backup generators should have kicked in immediately, but something in the lightning strike must have damaged the system. For precious seconds, Sarah and Michael stood frozen in the pitch blackness, listening to the confusion erupt among Salvatore's men down the corridor. "The stairs," Sarah whispered, her hand finding Michael's in the darkness. Now, they moved by touch and memory, Sarah guiding them toward the service stairwell as shouts and the beams of flashlights cut through the darkness behind them. The storm's fury provided cover, thunder masking their footsteps, the howling wind drowning out Michael's labored breathing. They had ascended one flight when the emergency lighting finally stuttered to life, casting the stairwell in that same eerie red glow. Sarah's first clear look at Michael in proper lighting sent a spike of medical alarm. Through her system, his skin had taken on a gray pallor, his eyes glassy with pain and blood loss. "You need blood," she said as they continued their painful ascent, "and proper wound closure." "Just get me somewhere defensible," Michael replied through gritted teeth. "My people will find us eventually." The third-floor surgical suite was locked, but yielded to Michael's surprisingly practiced lock-picking skills despite his weakened state. Inside, the typically bustling department was eerily silent, abandoned mid-shift when the evacuation order came. Surgical instruments remained on trays, monitors still displayed vital signs from phantom patients, and the characteristic antiseptic smell hung in the air. Sarah guided Michael to an operating table, her professional demeanor taking over as she gathered supplies with practiced efficiency. "I need to reopen the wound, clean it properly, and suture it," she explained, already cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. "It's going to hurt. I've had worse," Michael said, though his white-knuckled grip on the table edge belied his casual tone. Outside, the storm continued to rage, rain lashing against the windows with near-horizontal force. Lightning illuminated the operating room in stark flashes, followed by crashes of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Sarah worked with methodical precision, cleaning the wound, administering local anesthetic, preparing sutures. It was strange how natural this felt, treating Michael's wounds in the midst of chaos, their lives suspended in this bubble of medical necessity while danger circled ever closer. "Why did you really come back for me?" Sarah asked as she worked, needing to fill the silence with something other than the storm and her own racing thoughts. "At the hospital. Could have sent your men. It would have been safer." Michael watched her hands moving over his wound, his expression unreadable. "You know why?" "Tell me anyway," she insisted, meeting his gaze briefly before returning to her work. "Because you matter," he said simply. "Because from the moment you pulled me out of that storm, something changed." Sarah's hands stilled momentarily. "I'm a nurse. I'd have done the same for anyone, but I wouldn't have come back for anyone," Michael replied, wincing as she began suturing. "Only you." Before Sarah could respond, a noise from outside the operating room, the unmistakable sound of a door being carefully opened, brought them both to alertness. "Salvatore," Michael whispered, reaching again for his weapon despite Sarah's restraining hand on his arm. "You can barely sit up," she hissed. "Let me handle this." "How exactly do you plan to handle an armed Moretti enforcer?" Sarah's mind raced, evaluating their options with the same rapid assessment skills she used for triaging emergency patients. The surgical suite had two entrances, the main double doors and a secondary access from the prep room. If Salvatore's men came through one, they might still escape through the other. The decision was made for them when both doors crashed open simultaneously, armed men flooding into the operating room from both directions. In the lead stood a man Sarah recognized instantly as Salvatore Moretti, with the lean, muscular build of someone who maintained his physical edge as a professional necessity, his face handsome in a predatory way that sent chills down her spine. Michael Coretti, Salvatore said, his voice the same cold, commanding one Sarah had heard in the corridor, bleeding on another table. Some habits are hard to break. Michael straightened with visible effort, placing himself between Sarah and Salvatore despite his injury. You should have accepted the warning, Salvatore. Now it's too late for negotiations. Salvatore laughed, the sound devoid of humor. You're surrounded, bleeding, with only a nurse to protect. I don't think you're in a position to talk about negotiation. His gaze shifted to Sarah, assessing her with cold calculation. So this is the famous nurse who saved the great Michael Coretti. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Let her go, Michael said, his voice hardening. Your quarrel is with me. She has nothing to do with this. On the contrary, Salvatore replied, she has everything to do with this. You made her part of it the moment you involved her. Sarah felt her heart pounding, adrenaline sharpening her senses, making her acutely aware of every detail, the steadily worsening storm outside, the armed men positioned around the room, the tension vibrating in the air like a physical force. What do you want? She asked, surprising everyone, including herself, by speaking directly to Salvatore. The Moretti enforcer studied her with newfound interest. Brave, he commented. I can see why he keeps you around. Nobody keeps me, Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Now answer the question. What do I want? Salvatore moved closer, his men maintaining their positions with weapons trained on Michael. I want what he took from me: territory, respect, and the information about our supply chain that he's been using to dismantle my operation piece by piece. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the tableau in stark relief. Sarah and Michael backed against the operating table, surrounded by Moretti's men, the storm providing a dramatic backdrop to their final confrontation. It's over, Salvatore, Michael said, and something in his tone made Sarah glance at him sharply. There was a certainty there that didn't match their desperate circumstance. Check your phone. Confusion flickered across Salvatore's face, but he pulled out his phone. Whatever he saw there drained the color from his face. That's not possible, he whispered. I wasn't in that hospital by accident today, Michael said, strength returning to his voice despite his injury. Neither were my men. While you were focusing all your resources on capturing Sarah and me, the rest of my organization was dismantling everything you've built. Salvatore's phone continued to buzz with incoming messages, each apparently worse than the last. You couldn't have known that you had someone inside Memorial, that you were planning this ambush. Michael's smile was cold. Daniel Patel has been working for me for the past week. Once we identified him as your informant, it was simply a matter of feeding him the right information. Sarah stared at Michael, pieces clicking into place. You used me as bait, she said softly, the realization both horrifying and strangely unsurprising. I used us both, Michael corrected, never taking his eyes off Salvatore. I needed him to commit all his resources to this one operation. Salvatore's expression hardened with fury. Kill them both, he ordered his men. Before anyone could move, the windows imploded inward as the storm reached its peak fury, sending glass and rain spraying across the room. In the same instant, the lights failed again, plunging the surgical suite into chaos, illuminated only by lightning flashes and muzzle flares as gunfire erupted around them. Sarah felt Michael's arms encircle her, pulling her down to the floor, shielding her body with his own as bullets tore through the darkness above them. Despite his injury, his grip was iron, his body a barrier between her and the violence surrounding them. In the strobing effect of lightning and gunfire, Sarah caught glimpses of new figures entering the fray. Michael's men finally arriving, their coordinated assault overwhelming Salvatore's forces with brutal efficiency. It was over in seconds that felt like hours. When the emergency lights flickered back on, Salvatore Moretti lay dead on the surgical suite floor, surrounded by his fallen men. Dante stood in the doorway, soaked from the storm, his weapon still raised. Are you all right, sir? He asked, his eyes finding Michael where he still sheltered Sarah with his body. We're fine, Michael replied, though the fresh blood seeping through Sarah's careful sutures suggested otherwise. The buildings? Secured, Dante confirmed. All Moretti operations have been neutralized simultaneously. As planned, Sarah helped Michael to his feet, her nurse's training automatically assessing the damage to his wound while her mind struggled to process everything that had just happened. You planned this, she said, her voice hollow with the realization. All of it. Getting shot. The hospital, using me to draw Salvatore out. Michael met her gaze steadily. Not all of it. Not you. Never you. Thunder rumbled outside, the storm beginning to move away, its fury spent. In its wake, Sarah found herself standing amid the aftermath of a different kind of tempest, one that had transformed her life irrevocably. Take me home, Michael, she said quietly. Where is home now? He asked, the question weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. Sarah looked around at the destruction, at the man whose blood stained her hands for the second time since that first stormy night, at the path that had brought her from dedicated nurse to willing accomplice in this violent world. Wherever the storm isn't, she replied simply, and took his hand.